Silence filled the grand chamber as the last delegate took his seat. General Draven Solari had counted them all. 12 species, 47 military commanders. One shared fear that none of them wanted to admit out loud. The Galactic Military Assembly had not convened like this in over 200 years. The last time these species gathered in one room, they had been preparing to fight each other. Now they sat together, united by something far more troubling than their ancient rivalries. Humans. Admiral Yesik of the Varani Collective rose first. His scaled skin shimmered under the chamber lights as he activated the central display. A map of the galaxy appeared, and red dots spread across 17 star systems like a disease. For decades, Yesik said, his voice carrying the weight of barely controlled anger. That is all it took. 40 years ago, humans had never left their homeworld. Today they control 17 systems and show no signs of slowing down. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Draven watched the faces around him. He saw fear disguised as outrage. He saw pride masking uncertainty. He saw military leaders who had never faced a true threat in their entire careers. The solution is obvious, Yesik continued. We strike now, a coordinated assault on their core worlds while their fleet is still small. We crush this expansion before it becomes unmanageable. Heads nodded around the room. Commander Thesic of the Moravi Federation stood to voice his agreement. So did Fleet Admiral Benna of the Solarian League. One by one, the delegates expressed their support for immediate military action. Draven remained seated. He had not spoken a single word since entering the chamber. His silence drew attention, and eventually, all eyes turned to him. General Solari, said the assembly chairman, an ancient Peloran with 4 arms and milky white eyes. The Helix Dominion has remained quiet. What is your assessment? Draven stood slowly. He was old by his species' standards, and his body carried scars from conflicts that most beings in this room had only read about in historical records. He had fought in 3 major wars. He had commanded fleets and watched soldiers die under his orders. He understood violence in ways that these politicians in uniform could never grasp. My assessment, he said, is that you are all about to make the worst decision in galactic history. The chamber erupted. Yesik's scales flushed red with anger. Thesic demanded an explanation. Chairman Peloran raised his 4 arms, calling for order. Draven waited for the noise to fade. When silence returned, he spoke again. I request permission to share classified intelligence. Level 9 clearance. What I am about to show you has been gathered over 15 years of surveillance operations. It is not speculation. It is not theory. It is documented fact. The chairman hesitated, then granted permission. Draven activated his personal data unit and connected it to the central display. The map of human territories disappeared, replaced by darkness. Then footage began to play. Ships, weapons, industrial facilities that stretched across entire moons. Before I show you what humanity is capable of, Draven said, I need to ask a simple question. Do any of you know what happened on Kestrel 7? Blank stares answered him. Yesik shifted uncomfortably in his seat. 3 years ago, a Varani patrol vessel encountered a human cargo freighter in neutral space near the Kestrel system. The patrol commander, believing humans to be weak and primitive, fired upon the vessel. Draven paused, letting the words sink in. 42 humans died that day, including 17 children on an educational voyage. A tragic accident, Yesik said quickly. The commander was disciplined. The matter was resolved. Was it? Draven asked. Tell me, Admiral, what happened to your patrol fleet 3 days later? Yesik said nothing. His scales had turned pale. Draven continued for him. 60 Varani warships were stationed at the Kestrel 7 outpost. 60 vessels crewed by your finest officers. 3 days after that freighter was destroyed, not a single one of those ships remained. Not a single crew member survived. Gasps filled the chamber. This information had never been made public. The Varani had buried it deep. The humans did not file a diplomatic complaint, Draven said. They did not demand negotiations. They did not threaten or posture or give warnings. They simply arrived and killed every single Varani in that system. 72 hours from civilian deaths to complete retaliation. That is what you are proposing to Provoke. He looked around the room at the stunned faces. So I ask you again, are you certain you want to start a war with humanity? Because I assure you, they're already better at war than any of us have ever been. The chamber fell silent. For the first time since the meeting began, no one had anything to say. Draven let them sit with their fear. They needed to understand. They needed to see. And he was only getting started. The footage played on the central display, and every commander in the chamber watched in horror. Draven had obtained this recording through channels that did not officially exist. It showed the final moments of the Varani patrol fleet at Kestrel 7. 60 warships arranged in defensive formation around the outpost station. Standard positioning. Standard protocols. Nothing to suggest they expected anything unusual. Then the slipspace ruptures began. Human ships poured out of dimensional tiers like water breaking through a dam. Not dozens. Hundreds. Vessels of every size and configuration emerged in perfect synchronized waves. They did not announce themselves. They did not broadcast demands or ultimatums. They simply appeared and opened fire. This is real-time footage, Draven said as explosions lit up the display. The battle lasted 11 minutes. By the end, 60 Varani vessels and the entire outpost had been reduced to floating debris. 14,000 Varani personnel died. Admiral Yesik stood abruptly. This was not war. This was murder. Yes, Draven agreed. It was, just as the killing of those 42 civilians was murder. The humans simply responded in kind. The difference is that they were far more efficient at it. He paused the footage at a specific frame. The image showed a human vessel unlike anything in the Galactic database. It was massive, dark, and covered in weapon emplacements that glowed with barely contained energy. This is a Titan-class dreadnought, Draven said. Human military intelligence suggests they have 37 of these currently in active service. Each one is capable of destroying a small moon. We did not know these ships existed until Kestrel 7. Commander Thesic leaned forward. How did they mobilize so quickly? Our intelligence indicated their fleet was scattered across their territories. That is the question that should terrify you, Draven replied. I spent 2 years trying to understand how humans responded so fast. What I discovered changed everything I thought I knew about warfare. He switched the display to show human industrial facilities. Orbital stations the size of cities. Factory complexes that stretched across asteroid fields. Shipyards that operated continuously without pause. When that freighter was destroyed, Human Military Command issued what they call a Code Crimson Alert. Within 6 hours, every human ship within range began converging on Kestrel 7. But that was only the beginning. The truly frightening part happened on their homeworld and colonies. The footage changed to show civilian facilities transforming. Factories that had been producing consumer goods suddenly shifted their production lines. Agricultural stations reconfigured their equipment. Even educational institutions converted their resources. In 72 hours, the entire human economy pivoted to a war footing. Civilian shipyards began producing military vessels. Manufacturing plants started creating weapons and ammunition. Transportation networks redirected to move troops and supplies. This was not planned improvisation. This was a system that had been designed from the beginning. Fleet Admiral Benna spoke for the first time. Designed? You mean their entire civilization is built around the possibility of war? Not possibility, Draven said. Certainty. Humans do not hope for peace. They prepare for war while maintaining peace. Every system in their society has a military conversion protocol. Every citizen knows their role in a mobilization scenario. They have practiced this. They have drilled for it. And at Kestrel 7, we saw only a fraction of what they can do. He pulled up new data, charts, and numbers that painted a terrifying picture. The fleet that attacked Kestrel 7 was assembled from ships that were already in transit or stationed nearby. It represented less than 8% of humanity's total military capacity. They did not call reinforcements from their core worlds. They did not activate their reserve forces. They did not even wake up their mothballed fleet. They destroyed 60 warships and an entire outpost with what they consider a minor task force. The chamber had grown cold. Draven could see the calculations happening behind the delegates' eyes. If 8% could do that much damage, what could the full force accomplish? There is more, he continued. After the battle, human forces did not withdraw. They occupied the Kestrel system and began salvaging Varani technology. Within a week, they had reverse-engineered the patrol fleet's shield generators and integrated improvements into their own vessels. They learn from every engagement. They adapt. They improve. Each battle makes them stronger. Admiral Yesik sat down slowly. The aggressive confidence he had displayed earlier was gone, replaced by something that looked very much like fear. The Kestrel 7 incident was contained because humans viewed it as a proportional response to the deaths of their civilians, Draven said. They killed 14,000 of ours for 42 of theirs. In their minds, that made them merciful. They could have done much worse. He let that statement hang in the air. Now imagine what they would do if we attacked their homeworld. If we killed millions instead of dozens. Do you think they would stop at one outpost? Do you think they would show any mercy at all? No one answered. No one needed to. The footage of burning Varani ships said everything. Commander Thesic broke the heavy silence that had settled over the chamber. His voice carried a tone of desperate rationality, the sound of someone searching for any explanation that might make the universe feel safe again. Surely this was an exceptional response, he said. They had just lost civilians. Children. Any species would react strongly to such a tragedy. It does not mean they're inherently more dangerous than the rest of us. Draven had expected this argument. He had made himself, years ago, before he truly understood what humanity was. You are correct that grief can motivate terrible violence, he replied. But what happened at Kestrel 7 was not grief. It was doctrine. The humans did not rage against us. They executed a pre-planned military operation with precision that suggests decades of preparation. And that is because, unlike every species in this room, humans never stopped fighting. He changed the display to show a timeline. It stretched back 10,000 years, and it was filled with red marks. Each mark represented a war. This is the recorded military history of humanity on their homeworld alone. Before they ever reached the stars, they fought each other constantly. Not occasional border disputes. Not ceremonial conflicts. Real wars with real casualties. Millions dead. Cities destroyed. Entire civilizations wiped from existence. The delegates stared at the timeline. The red marks were so numerous that they blurred together into a continuous line of violence. During the time it took the Peloran Empire to develop agriculture, humans fought 412 major wars, Draven continued. While the Varani Collective was learning to build cities, humans invented increasingly efficient ways to destroy them. They did not evolve past violence like the rest of us. They evolved through violence. War is not something humans do. It is something they are. Fleet Admiral Benna spoke slowly, as if trying to process what she was hearing. How is that possible? How can a species survive constant warfare? By becoming better at it than anyone else, Draven answered. Look at this. The display shifted to show human educational institutions, military academies with histories spanning centuries, research facilities dedicated to weapons development, training programs that began when human children were barely old enough to walk. Humans have an entire profession dedicated to studying warfare, Draven said. They call them military historians. These individuals spend their entire lives analyzing battles, strategies, and tactics from across human history. They examine every victory and defeat. They identify what worked and what failed. Then they teach those lessons to the next generation of soldiers. He pulled up another set of images. These showed human entertainment media, films depicting massive battles, games that simulated combat scenarios, stories that celebrated warriors and glorified sacrifice. Their culture reinforces this obsession. Human children are exposed to warfare from the moment they can comprehend stories. Their heroes are soldiers. Their legends are battles. They build monuments to their dead warriors and honor them with ceremonies that last for generations. Violence is not shameful to humans. It is sacred. Admiral Yesick found his voice again, though it sounded weaker than before. But they have been at peace since they joined the galactic community. 40 years without conflict. 40 years of preparation. Draven corrected. Do you know what humans call their current military status? They call it peacetime readiness. They maintain standing armies even when there is no war. They train soldiers who may never see combat. They build weapons they hope to never use. This is considered normal in human society. He showed the next set of data. Human military training programs. Physical conditioning that pushed bodies to their breaking point. Psychological conditioning that taught soldiers to function under extreme stress. Combat simulations that became more realistic and more brutal with each generation. A human soldier spends years learning how to kill efficiently. They train in every environment, every condition, every possible scenario. By the time they enter actual combat, they have already fought thousands of simulated battles. They have died in training simulations more times than most beings can count. Fear has been beaten out of them. Hesitation has been replaced with reflex. Commander Thesic shook his head slowly. This is madness. No species should dedicate so much to destruction. And yet they have, Draven said. And that dedication has made them the most effective warriors in the galaxy. They do not fight like us. They do not view war as a necessary evil or a last resort. To humans, war is an art form. They study it. They practice it. They perfect it. And they have been doing so for 10,000 years. He paused to let the weight of those words settle over the chamber. We have been spacefaring for millennia. We have fought our wars and learned our lessons. We believed that made us strong. But while we were exploring the stars and building our empires, humans were down on their little planet, killing each other with ever-increasing efficiency. They compressed more warfare into 10,000 years than we have experienced in 10 million. The display showed a final image. Human soldiers standing in formation, their faces hard, their eyes empty of anything except purpose. That is what you want to fight, Draven said quietly. Are you still confident in your chances? Admiral Yesick rose from his seat with forced authority. The fear was still there in his eyes, but pride demanded he push back. He had built his career on strength and aggression, and admitting terror in front of his peers was something he could not do. Impressive history, he said, his voice steadier than it had any right to be. But history is not the present. Human technology is decades behind our own. Their ships are crude. Their weapons are primitive. Numbers and training mean nothing against superior firepower. Draven had been waiting for this objection. It was the same mistake every military analyst made when they first studied humanity. They looked at human equipment and saw weakness. They did not understand what they were really seeing. You are wrong, Draven said simply, and I will show you exactly how wrong. He pulled up technical specifications on the display. Schematics of human vessels appeared alongside their galactic equivalents. At first glance, the comparison seemed to support Yesick's argument. Human ships were blocky, utilitarian, and lacking the elegant lines of Varani or Paloran designs. Human vessels use modular construction, Draven explained. Each component can be manufactured independently, transported easily, and assembled quickly. A single human shipyard can produce 3 times the tonnage of a Varani facility in the same time period. Their technology is not primitive. It is deliberately simplified for mass production. He zoomed in on a human weapon system. It looked bulky and inelegant compared to the sleek energy projectors favored by other species. This is a standard human railgun. It fires solid projectiles using electromagnetic acceleration. No complex power systems. No delicate components. Minimal maintenance required. A single human cruiser carries 40 of these weapons. They fire continuously until the ammunition runs out, and human logistics ensure the ammunition never runs out. Fleet Admiral Benna studied the specifications with growing concern. The damage output is lower than our energy weapons. Per shot, yes, Draven agreed. But humans do not fire single shots. They fire barges. Thousands of projectiles in sustained volleys. Their doctrine is simple: overwhelm enemy defenses through sheer volume of fire. While our ships carefully aim each shot, human vessels are pouring metal into space at rates our defensive systems cannot handle. He changed the display again. This time it showed human military infrastructure, orbital stations, ground facilities, hidden bases scattered across their territory. The human fleet currently numbers 3,000 combat-ready vessels. That sounds manageable. It is not. Those 3,000 ships represent what humans call their active duty force. Behind them are another 8,000 vessels in reserve status. Ships that are maintained, crewed, and ready to deploy within days. The numbers were starting to have their effect. Delegates who had been skeptical were now doing the mathematics in their heads. But even that is not the true threat, Draven continued. The true threat is what happens when humans decide to fully mobilize. He showed footage of human industrial capacity, factory stations that stretched across asteroid belts, automated manufacturing systems that could operate without rest, supply chains that connected every human world into a single enormous production network. During peacetime, human shipyards produce approximately 5 new vessels per week across all their facilities. During wartime mobilization, that number increases to 50 per week, for as long as the war continues. Commander Thesic made a choking sound. That is impossible. No economy can sustain that level of production. Human economies can, Draven replied, because they're designed for exactly this purpose. Every major human industry has military conversion protocols. Civilian factories can switch to weapons production within days. Transportation networks can redirect to move troops and supplies. Even their food production systems have contingency plans for wartime rationing. He pulled up one final piece of data. This one showed weapons that had never been used in galactic warfare. Massive devices of terrifying scale. Humans have weapons they do not talk about. During their internal conflicts, they developed devices capable of destroying entire planets. They called them world crackers. When they achieved interstellar travel, they locked these weapons away. But they did not destroy them. They are still there, waiting in secure facilities, ready to be deployed if humanity ever faces an existential threat. The chamber had gone completely silent. Even Yesic had nothing to say. You asked about technology, Draven said. Human technology is not inferior. It is different. They build for war on a scale we cannot comprehend. They produce weapons and ships at rates we cannot match. And they have reserves we cannot see. He let the display fade to darkness. The fleet that destroyed our outpost at Kestrel 7 was assembled in 72 hours from whatever happened to be nearby. If we attack human colonies, we will not face a task force. We will face the full might of a species that has spent 10,000 years preparing for exactly this moment. Admiral Yesic sat down slowly. The fight had gone out of him completely. What you call their peacetime military is a sleeping giant, Draven said, and you're proposing to wake it up. I am begging you to reconsider. The ancient chairman Pelorin raised one of his 4 arms, drawing attention to himself for the first time since Draven had begun his presentation. General Solari, he said in a voice that carried the weight of centuries. You have shown us their capabilities. You have demonstrated their history and their industrial might. But surely there must be limits. Surely humans can be reasoned with, negotiated with. They're a rational species, are they not? Draven had saved this part for last because it was the most important. Everything else he had shown them could be understood through numbers and data. What came next required them to understand something far more difficult. They needed to understand how humans think. Humans are rational, Draven agreed. But their rationality operates on principles that are alien to us. To understand why we cannot simply negotiate our way out of a war with humanity, you need to understand their concept of proportional response. He activated a new display. This one showed human military doctrine, translated from their original languages into galactic standard. When humans are attacked, they do not simply repel the attack. They do not stop when the immediate threat is neutralized. They continue until they are certain the threat can never return. This is not rage. This is policy. The display highlighted a specific passage from human strategic documents. Draven read it aloud. The purpose of war is not victory. It is the complete elimination of the enemy's capacity and will to fight. Forever. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Humans do not fight to win battles, Draven explained. They fight to end wars permanently. When they engage an enemy, their goal is not to defeat that enemy. Their goal is to make it impossible for that enemy to ever threaten them again. This can mean destruction of military assets. It can mean occupation of territory. In extreme cases, it can mean total annihilation. Commander Thesic shifted uncomfortably. That sounds like genocide. Humans have committed genocide, Draven said bluntly. Against each other, multiple times throughout their history. They know exactly what it takes to erase a people from existence because they have done it before. They are not proud of it, but they are capable of it. And they will do it again if they believe their survival is at stake. Fleet Admiral Benna spoke carefully. The Kestrel 7 response was brutal, but it was not genocide. They killed 14,000 and stopped. That suggests restraint. It does, Draven agreed, because humans classified Kestrel 7 as a minor incident. 42 dead civilians did not threaten human existence. The response was proportional by their standards. Kill some of ours, we kill many of yours, then we stop. But consider what happens if we attack their colonies. If we kill millions. He paused to ensure everyone was listening. Human psychology has a threshold. Cross it, and you do not face proportional response. You face total war. Every human becomes a combatant. Their economy transforms entirely. Their production reaches maximum capacity. And their objective shifts from punishing the attacker to eliminating the attacker completely. The display showed historical examples from human internal conflicts. Cities reduced to rubble. Entire populations displaced. Industrial centers bombed into craters that still mark the surface of their homeworld. This is what humans did to each other when they felt genuinely threatened, Draven said. These images are from a conflict they called World War II. It lasted 6 years. 60 million humans died. When it ended, 2 entire nations had been physically rebuilt from the ground up under military occupation. He let the images speak for themselves. Burned cities, mass graves, weapons that could vaporize hundreds of thousands in a single flash. Humans developed weapons capable of destroying cities specifically to end that war faster, Draven continued. They used those weapons against civilian populations. Twice. Because they calculated that killing 200,000 people quickly would save more lives than a prolonged invasion. That is human military logic. That is what you're proposing to fight. Admiral Yesick looked physically ill. They used such weapons on their own species? Yes, and they have built far worse since then. The world crackers I mentioned earlier are direct descendants of those weapons. Humans know exactly how to destroy populations on a massive scale because they invested tremendous resources into developing those capabilities. Draven walked closer to the central display, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. If we attack them, we do not get to choose when the war ends. They do. And human wars do not end with negotiated settlements when they feel truly threatened. They end when one side no longer exists as a functional civilization. That is not speculation. That is documented history. He turned to face the assembly directly. Every scenario our strategists have modeled ends the same way. We might win early battles. We might inflict significant casualties. But eventually, human production overwhelms us. Human resolve outlasts us. And human doctrine demands our complete destruction. There is no victory against humanity. There's only survival by not provoking them in the first place. Draven deactivated the display and stood in the dim light of the chamber. He had shown them everything. The data, the history, the terrifying capabilities. Now he needed to make them feel it. 5 years ago, he began, his voice quieter than before. I attended a diplomatic function on the human colony of New Geneva. It was meant to build goodwill between our species. Trade agreements, cultural exchange, the usual meaningless ceremonies that politicians love. The delegates listened. This was different from his statistics and footage. This was personal. I was seated next to a human diplomat named Samuel Wright. He was old by human standards. Gray hair, weathered face. He had fought in several of their colonial wars before transitioning to diplomacy. We shared a meal and made conversation about trivial matters. Draven paused, remembering that evening with perfect clarity. Eventually, the conversation turned to history. Wright mentioned his grandfather, a man who had fought in World War II. The same conflict I showed you earlier. 60 million dead in 6 years. I asked Wright how his species had recovered from such devastation. The chamber was completely silent. He looked at me with those strange human eyes and simply said, "We were angry." As if that explained everything. As if anger could justify 60 million corpses. I asked him to elaborate, and he told me something I have never forgotten. Draven met the eyes of each delegate in turn. He said, "When someone attacks what we love, we do not stop until they cannot hurt us anymore. We do not count the cost. We do not consider the consequences. We simply destroy whatever threatens us and deal with the aftermath later. It is not rational. It is not civilized. But it is what we are." The words settled over the assembly like a burial shroud. I asked him if humans ever regretted this approach, if they felt guilt for the destruction they caused. He thought about it for a moment and then said, "Sometimes, after it is over, but never during. When we are fighting, we are not capable of regret. We are only capable of winning." Draven returned to his place at the delegation table. "That conversation haunts me," he admitted, "because Samuel Wright was not a soldier. He was a diplomat, a man of peace by profession. And yet he spoke of total war with casual acceptance, as if the annihilation of millions was simply something humans did when circumstances required it. Not monstrous, not exceptional, just inevitable." Admiral Yesek stirred but did not speak. His aggressive posture had completely collapsed over the course of the presentation. "We have been treating humanity as a minor species that expanded too quickly," Draven said. "We have been discussing preemptive strikes and military containment. But we are not dealing with a young civilization that needs to be taught its place. We are dealing with a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting violence, then carried that expertise to the stars." He gestured at the now dark display. "Everything I have shown you today is what humans allow us to see. Their public fleet, their known installations, their documented history. I guarantee you there is more. Hidden facilities, secret weapons, contingency plans we cannot imagine. Humans plan for every possible threat. They assume war is always coming, and they prepare accordingly." Chairman Paloran spoke again. "What do you recommend, General?" "Peace," Draven said simply. "Not because it is morally superior, not because war is wrong, but because we cannot win. I recommend we establish comprehensive trade agreements with humanity. Economic ties that make war unprofitable for both sides. Cultural exchanges that humanize us in their eyes. Non-aggression treaties with real enforcement mechanisms." He stood straighter, his voice gaining strength. "Make the humans prosperous. Make them comfortable. Give them no reason to view us as threats. Because right now, they see us as potential trading partners and curious neighbors. We are not their enemies. If we attack them, we become their enemies. And I have shown you what happens to human enemies." The vote was called an hour later. It was unanimous. The resolution passed without a single objection. The Galactic Military Assembly officially declared that no member species would take hostile action against human territories. Trade delegations would be sent. Cultural programs would be established. Every effort would be made to ensure peaceful coexistence. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Admiral Yesek approached Draven. The two old warriors stood facing each other. "You saved us," Yesek said quietly. "I was ready to lead us into extinction." Draven shook his head. "I showed you the truth. What you did with it was your choice." He walked out of the chamber and into the corridor beyond. Through the viewport, he could see the stars stretching endlessly in all directions. Somewhere out there, humanity was building, growing, preparing. The giant was still sleeping. And thanks to today, it would remain asleep a little longer. That was the best anyone could hope for.